Hi, I'm Amber Rosenberg, and this is my presentation over Mapp v. Ohio, which is 367 U.S. 643 in 1961. The constitutional question was, are the confiscated materials protected by the First Amendment? Dolly Mapp was convicted of possessing obscene materials after an admittedly illegal police search of her home for a fugitive. She appealed her conviction on the basis of freedom of expression. And we're going to talk about the facts of this case, because they're probably the most insane part of this case. On May 23rd, 1957, 3 officers arrived at Miss Mapp's home where she lived with her daughter, and they had a tip that a suspect of a bombing was in her house, or that she knew where he was, that he was hiding out there. So they, I guess, knocked on the door and asked for entry, and she called her attorney and said, no, I'm not going to allow you in without a search warrant. And the officers came back 3 hours later, and they decided, when she didn't answer the door right away, and this is a testified statement from the police officer, quote, "We did try to pry the screen door to gain entrance. The attorney on the scene testified that a policeman tried to kick in the door and then broke the glass in the door, and somebody reached in and opened the door and let them in. And her back door was apparently broken too. So when they entered her house, she was in the hallway and she was screaming at them and hey, where's your search warrant? I told you couldn't come in here without one." And they held up this piece of paper. So she snatched it and she put it in her dress, and she was then apprehended. The piece of paper was taken from her and she was handcuffed because she was belligerent. She was then forcefully taken upstairs while the officers searched her bedroom, her daughter's room, all her drawers, all her stuff, and also her living room, her kitchen, and her dining room. Now, turns out they found some obscene pictures, which is apparently illegal in Ohio. I didn't know that until I was researching this case, that it was definitely illegal to have pornographic images in Ohio in 1961. So the court decided in a 6-3 decision for Mapp that they were going to throw out the First Amendment connection entirely. And then they held, and this is a quote from Mr. Justice Clark, "All evidence obtained by searches and seizures in violation of the Constitution is, by that same authority, inadmissible in a state court." And then the exclusionary rule was born. I'd also like to quote one of the most important quotes from this case, in my opinion, also from Justice Clark, was, "Our holding that the exclusionary rule is an essential part of both the 4th and 14th Amendment is not only the logical dictate of prior cases, but also makes very good sense. There is no war between the Constitution and common sense." And I know it's super important because, honestly guys, it is common sense that evidence obtained illegally should not be used in the court of law, in my opinion, and also in the court's opinion. So I thought that was relevant. The dissenting opinion, I have a couple quotes on here, but basically the dissenting opinion was that the court had no right to throw out the First Amendment connection, as it was the constitutional question. It was the whole point of the case, and they threw it out. And it kind of accuses the court of just using the case to overthrow Wolf v. Colorado, which was what made illegally obtained evidence admissible in a court of law. So, yeah. On the back, we have Miss Mapp's mugshot, and I'll post a picture of that. And I would just like to say that she was convicted, because at the time that evidence was admissible in court. So although there was an argument that could be made for that to be completely thrown out, it wasn't. And like I stated earlier, the exclusionary rule was the importance of this case, and it does prevent evidence collected illegally from being used in a court of law. And I kind of told you guys my opinion about the case, but basically I get where the dissenting opinion is coming from. I understand that it was the constitutional question for the First Amendment to be involved, and they did kind of throw that out and just kind of do something entirely different with it. I get that. But, and some of you guys were talking about this in the discussion board too, when we were talking about gay marriage and how maybe the outcome wasn't part of the constitutional question, but that the outcome was more important than how they got to the answer and the little tiny steps in between. And I kind of feel like that's how I feel about this, that the exclusionary rule is the most important part of this case, and it is something we should be really thankful for. And so, I mean, maybe they didn't do it exactly like they were supposed to, and maybe they could have done it differently, and maybe it would have happened later down the road, but I think it's very important that it happened in general, and I'm not really mad at what the court did. So, that's my presentation, and I hope you guys have a fantastic summer, and it was a great semester. Thank you.